Breathe. And then we need to close together. Good morning. Today we're going to start on Hey Amid Beis, the Mishnah Hagin of Nefesh Yisrael. It's the second Mishnah actually on Hey Amid Beis, 85b. Yeah. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. We're learning we should have Beis Migdash, learning for Shleima, for Naftali ben Menuch Bela, for whoever else needs for Shleima, for Israel, and for hostages. Be free. Okay, so the Mishnah starts out, Hagain of Nefesh Yisrael. This is not kidnapping, but like kidnapping, abducting. That's the word they use for Hagain of Nefesh, abducting. Kidnaps could be for children, but maybe not. Kidnapping is a prohibition that incurs a death penalty. So it says, it's only going to be chayav until he takes him out of the domain that he's in and brings him into his own domain. He quotes the pasuk. It says, "Biyadai, v'nimtza biyadai," found in his hand. Like we catch him. It means, what does it mean? Catch him. Catch him with him when it's in his domain.
They also consider kidnapping, if you keep a person in a certain place,
like hostage. Let's take a look. It's not so simple. Rabbi says that it's not enough just to confine him. It's also you have to actually work him. You have to take him as a slave, steal him and take him as a slave. Samar means to work him. And sell him. What happens if he doesn't sell him? That's good. What happens if he doesn't sell him? He just steals him. Is there a death penalty on that?
Sounds similar to the sheep or the hog.
Okay. Let's see. We'll see. So far we have Machlekes Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda if he needs to work the person as well, or just if he takes him. That's what it looks like. Now the next case, someone that steals his own son. He takes his son and he takes him as a slave, and I guess he sells him. Rabbi Yishmael ben Aishor, Rabbi Yechon Mechayev, the Chum say that he's pater. Rabbi Yechon says that he's chayev. He's kidnapping. Ganav misha chetzav eved v'chetzav minchen. Let's say the person was half a slave anyway, and he steals him. So Rabbi Yehuda mechayev v'chachamim paichim. Now we have the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. We had Rabbi Yehuda before as well. Rabbi Yehuda said that you had to work him. Now we have the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that he's going to be chayev by a chetzav eved, v'chetzav minchen. Okay. Where it says Tanakama leboy yimer. Saying to the Tanakama, you don't have to work him. What's the problem with that? The pasuk seems to say v'samer by that you do work him. How much work needs to be done? According to the Tanakama, even if he works him less than the value of a pruta, that's already satisfactory. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, would need to be the amount of a shava pruta. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is emphasizing. You have to get in a real work there. That means it has to have that value. Not because of the acquisition, because you have to be stealing him as you're taking him as a slave when you don't have those rights. It doesn't have to do with the kinyan, I think, as far as I know. But Rabbi Yirmiyah, Yemi has a question. Ganva, if you steal a person, a machari, and you sell him, yashin, and he was asleep. Mahu, what's the din? You had to work him. See in the Gemara. Machar ishala ubra mahu. Let's say you took a woman, but you're not selling the woman. You took a woman, and you're selling her as into slavery, but not for her. She's always going to be free. Just for the fetus is going to be a slave. Is it possible to have work while the person's asleep, or is it possible to have the fetus to be doing work? Gemara says, what are you talking about? Just say that there was no work, and so he's exempt. Says, it's necessary. It could be that there was work. Yashin, in the case where the person was asleep, there's agale, where he leaned on the person. There weren't enough chairs. Sat down. I don't know. Isha, the ukma ba'apizika, the woman, because she was pregnant, so she takes up more space. She blocked the wind from coming, stop the draft from coming in. So is that considered work? Is that considered slave labor? So yeah, what's the halacha teiku? Is the Gemara asking according to the Tanakama where you don't need a Shava Pruta? Or is the Gemara asking even according to Rabbi Yehuda where you do need a Shava Pruta? Is this the Shava Pruta? What's the Gemara's question? What's Rabbi Yehuda's question? What do you think? What's the Daf?
What it seems about this pruta is like any value is considered a stealing. I don't think it was about the FOR accusation. I think it's just like what's considered stealing.
No, but it's not just the stealing, it's the making him work for a certain amount.
Wouldn't that making him work be like the stealing? Because he'll be getting benefit from the state that's not him.
I thought that it's just taking the person, that's the prohibition, but taking him to work is the detail. What's this? Lamed Gimel. Yeah, everyone agrees. We mentioned before that if you don't sell him, you're not chayiv. It's only if you resell him.
In this case, of a pregnant woman is not even direct work. It's just that since she has a baby, like
she's blocking the wind, right?
She's not actively doing anything. She just stands.
They don't mention anything over here. If it's according to, oh, they do. According to the Tanakhama, that holds less than a Shava Pruta is considered. Yeah, it makes sense. According to the Tanakhama, it says less than a Shava Pruta is considered work that you worked them. So maybe the leaning on the sleeping person or the pregnant woman that's blocking the wind, that should also be considered work. So the question would be according to the Tanakhama. They quote over here, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, that says that it needs to be more than a Shava Pruta. So then this is obviously not a Shava Pruta.
It's like indirect.
Yeah, that's Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. Okay, the Gemara leaves that out of take. L'tana Rabbanan, we have a brisa. It says ki matzi yeshkeni v'nefesh miachav. Take a look at the pasuk. Barim Chaf Dalet. Yeah, this says like this. If a man is witnessed, well, that's the way they translate ki matzeh. He is found. Goinev nefesh miachav, kidnapping a person from among his brothers, Bnei Yisrael, of Jewish people, children of Israel. This Amr boy, and then he treats him as a slave. Umacharin sells him. Umei saganavahu, kidnapper must die. Gemara learns like this. It says, Ainly ella ishigana. I would only know that if it's a man that did the act of kidnapping. How do I know isha minayan? How do I know that if it was a woman that was a kidnapper? How do we know that she would also be chayiv? Because it says, "Ki yimatzei ish geinev nefesh me'echav." Find a man that stole a soul, geinev nefesh. But so basically, the abductee could be anyone, because it says nefesh. But the kidnapped could be anyone. But the kidnapper says ish, says a man. So it's maybe not a woman.
Since it says in nefesh, would it extend to animals?
It won't extend to animals, but it would extend to children and other. So, but Ishminayan to Talmud Laimar, we quote another pasuk, the Goin of Ish. That's in Parshas Mishpatim. Someone steals a man, and he sells him. So over there it says the Goin of Ish, and someone that steals a man. Doesn't say Ish Shaganav Ish. It says V'Goin of Ish. It doesn't classify the gender of the kidnapper. So over here it teaches me Gainavish that it's going to include even a woman. Because the ish is not the kidnapper, the ish is the kidnapped. Ainly Shagana. I would only know so far if a man steals, man kidnaps, Bain Isha Bain Ish. It doesn't matter who he steals, who he kidnaps, could be a man or a woman. And I also know Isha Shagan V'ish. I also know a woman that kidnaps a man because it says V'Gainev Ish. And we said V'Gainev means someone that steals, and it doesn't determine what gender. But what does that person steal? The undetermined gender steals a man. So I would only know if a man steals anyone, or a woman that steals a man. But what about Isha Shagan V'ish? Isha Shagan V'ish. Isha Shagan V'ish Minayin. How do I know if a woman steals another woman that she's also chayiv? Because it only said someone steals a man, but I don't know someone that steals a woman. In that pasuk it doesn't say v'gainev nefesh. It says v'gainev ish, so which means just a man. So Talmud Laimar. So that when it comes to the verdict, it says umeis haganav hahu, that robber, that kidnapper should be put to death. Now it doesn't determine over there what the gender of the ganav is. So we learn from that mikol makom, even if it's a even if the ganav stole a woman. Where's that pasuk mesa ganav? That would go back to Matzei ish gainev nefesh. That's over here. Yeah. So because it says mesa ganav, and in this pasuk the kidnapped is a nefesh. And so the nefesh refers to everyone, man or woman, and the ganav doesn't say what gender he is. So that would be even if it's a woman that kidnapped a woman. Okay, interesting. Now it says Tanya Yidach. We have another brisa. It says a Tosefta. It says, man will be found stealing a person from amongst his brothers. It doesn't matter if he steals a man or if he steals a woman. Ger, doesn't matter if he steals a convert. It doesn't matter if he steals a freed slave, not if he's a slave, right now a slave. Bekatan, all of those cases is chayev, and chayev, of course, is referring to the death penalty. Now, the brisa continues, it says, Ganvay v'lay machari, let's say he stole him, but he didn't sell him. Machari v'adayin yeshtem b'shusay. He sold him, but he never removed him from his own house. I guess he locked him in his house. He put a padlock on his front, on the guy's front door. So he locked him in, and then he sold him to someone, but he never took him out. Pater, because he's only going to be, if he did a full Geneva, that means he has to take him out of that domain. Machrai la'aviv. Let's say he sold the person to the father of the kidnapped. He stole a child and he sold him to his own father.
Ransom.
Ransom, right? Oilachiv, or to his brother, Elechem min akrevim, or to one of his relatives, he's chayiv. And Hagani v'savadim is pater. But someone steals, the person was already a slave, he's pater. I was just with someone, the guy was telling me the story about but he was taken hostage in Colombia. It's every day, but it doesn't mean that it's, yeah. It was describing to me how terrible it was.
It happened to my brother's best friend, but it was like in Brazil, but it was like in 2 hours he was already let go.
Oh,
It was very fast negotiating.
because they paid. Here
Yeah.
they didn't. Here they didn't pay. They came in and the police came in and shot the people, the abductors. Yeah, but he said that the uncertainty of what's going to be was the worst part of it. You don't know how long, and they brainwash you while you're there. They don't. But he did have newspapers. He was reading about himself. Like every day they would bring him newspapers. He would read. Anyway, okay.
My uncle went through
Should protect us. Oh yeah.
Imagine he's the only like 6 foot something, like very white, blue eyes. He stood out like a sore thumb. Just kidnap him left and right.
Wow. Right. Okay. Tani Tana Kamida Rav Sheshes. This brisa, the second brisa we just said, someone said this over. A Tana said this over in front of Rav Sheshes. We learned that a Tana, someone that memorizes brisas, and the head of the yeshiva would then expound on sort of like the university library. So they didn't have actual libraries, but they had someone that memorized all of it. So he said this, and Amar Lay, Rav Sheshes said to him, Amar Lay, Ani Shaina Rav Shimon Aimer. I say in that brisa when you said that someone that sells to a relative that may echav. Rav Shimon says that because the pasuk says if you would find someone that stole a soul, kidnapped a soul from your brothers, Rav Shimon says ad sheyitzenu mishusachav, that you have to take them out from the brothers. But if you sold them to a relative, then you're going to be pater. That's not considered kidnapping and selling. If that's the case, and Rav Shimon says this, and you say that you chayiv, it's tini pater. You should say that not chayiv. You should say pater, because in the brisa said elechem min akrevim is chayiv. He says, but I learned that Rav Shimon says pater. Gemara asks a question on Rav Sheshes that's ready to amend the brisa. He says, my kusha, Dilma ha Rav Shimon ha Rabbanan. Maybe it's machlekes. You say the Rav Shimon says pater, but the reason why the brisa says chayiv is because he argues on Rav Shimon. It's the Rabbanan. Gemara says leisal kadaita. You shouldn't think like this. Dam Rabbi Yechon, because Rabbi Yechon taught. Listen to this. We had this Gemara a bunch of times. Stam masnisen. We're not in full like this, but we had it in quotes from this. Stam masnisen is Reb Meir. An anonymous Mishnah is going to be Reb Meir. Stam Tesefta, anonymous Tesefta is going to be Reb Nechemya. Stam Sifra, an anonymous Sifra, which is the Medrash, the halachic Medrash on Sefer Vayikra. Right? The book is Reb Yehuda. That's how you remember. Stam Sifra, Reb Yehuda. Stam Sifri is Reb Shimon, or Rashbi, if you want it to rhyme, or Shimi. Stam Sifri is Reb Shimon. So what happened here is the Sifri is the Medrash on Bamidbar and Devarim, and since that pasuk is in Devarim, so the Medrash on that pasuk that says Meyachav, the anonymous Medrash has to be Reb Shimon. So you can't tell me when it says Reb Shimon Aimer that the other opinion there is, and the anonymous opinion is not Reb Shimon. The anonymous opinion there is also Reb Shimon. So if that's the case, so the whole thing is Reb Shimon. So we can't say that there's a machlekes over there. So we have to say, if Reb Shimon holds that, then we have to say that it's going to be pater, not chayiv. Kulu alib de Rabbi Akiva, and all of them are according to Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Where it takes that quite serious, that the anonymous Sifri, so it's supposed to be Sifrei. Anonymous Sifri is the opinion of Reb Shimon. So there was machlekes. If someone steals his own son, machlekes Rabbi Yishmael b'nai shel Rabbi Yechon ben Breka, where he says that he's chayiv, and the Chum says pater. My time of the Rabbanon. Why did the Chum say he's pater? He took his son, and he's obviously selling him. It's kidnapping. Amar Abaya Damar Kra. We're on page of 86. Abaya says towards the top. Abaya says Damar Kra Ki Matzi. Pasuk says, if you will find a man steals a soul from his brothers, the Chum learn from this that only if you find that he's stolen, prat lematzi, is coming to exclude someone that was always there. That's not considered stolen because the son was always in his domain. Amalei Rav Papa Abaya. Rav Papa is a student of Abaya. He says if that's the way you want to learn the word ki matze, that it has to be something new, that he is found in this new situation, but not that he was always there. So this is going to be problematic for another pasuk, because there's another pasuk that says, "Ki matzi yesh shecher misha bulas bal." If you find a man that's laying with a woman that is married to a man, it means if you find a man that's committing adultery with a woman, with a married woman, pasuk says that they'll both be put to death. So hachinami ki matze prat matze. Over there, do you want to say that it's only this death penalty would only be if this is a new situation? However, but kagain shall base plaini. But if it would be prat lamatzi game to base plain, let's say there's a household. It doesn't tell us the name, but let's say there's a household like so and so. They didn't give us the name. It's lashon hara. But apparently there were men and women that lived there together, married in the same house, and like a hostel type of thing. The shchichen gabayu, that they're always in that house. You're going to say that if a man lives with another man's wife just because they're in the same house, so then they're going to be exempt? They're going to be chayiv. You can't learn that ki matze means that it has to be a new situation that wasn't before. Yeah? Or else you'd exempt this house that has multiple families in it. Amalei, so Abaya responds to Rav Papa, you didn't understand what I was saying. Not Ki Matze is teaching me that it needs to be a new situation. Anam even to be other kamina. I was talking about that it was found in his hand. Ki Matze, yeah, that could be the situation is existing. But v'nimtza biyada, when we say he's caught, he's found within his hand, so that would only be if he took him from outside, not if he was always in his house. Amar Rava says based on this, Hilkach, according to the way Abaya taught, that v'nimtza biyada is coming to exclude anyone that's always there, so excluding a son, right? That can't be considered kidnapped. So Hani Mikri Dardaki, these teachers, Masni Rabbanan, or those people that teach Mishnayos, they're considered like they're always there at Patiri. If they try to sell one of their students into slavery, they're going to be pater. Yeah, because they're always there. Just according to the Rabbanan, not Rav Yishmael. Okay. If someone steals a slave, but the person had two owners, and one of the owners had let free, emancipated his part of owning the slave. Yeah, so the person becomes a chetzi eved v'chesed ben chayrin. He's half free. One of the owners was a nice guy and left him in this strange predicament. So remember the machlekes b'sham and b'sil we had. You force the other owner to set him free, or else he'll never be able to get married. whatever the case is, while he's in this situation, it says that the Rabbi Yehuda says that if someone steals such a person, he's chayiv. Chachamim say that he's pater. It's non hasam. We learned in over there, in Baba Kama, that if someone causes damage to a Eved Kanani, to a slave, so he has to pay. However, and it says also that even if he embarrasses him, he has to pay. Rabbi Yehuda main lavadim baishas. There's no embarrassment to a slave. Only damages.
Earlier in the pasuk that it included a convert and included a slave. In the bottom of
that was included a freed slave, convert or a freed slave, emancipated slave.
In the bottom of the note, it said like basically people that were obligated to mitzvah. This part-time slave wouldn't be.
He also has mitzvahs.
So,
yeah.
Yeah,
there's a machlekes. If he's a part-time slave, if someone steals him, if he's chayiv. Over there was a freed slave. He's fully by the freed slave, he's going to be chayiv. By the part-time slave, is a machlekes. So Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein lavadim baishas." Okay, you don't have to pay baishas to a embarrassment. If you embarrass the slave. My time, the Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda that says this? Summer kra. Because it says in the pasuk, if two people are fighting. Now over there, it's talking about. Let me read it to you. It's talking about when the wife of one of the men step in and grabs the other person by his testicles and embarrasses him. Right? Yeah, it says penalty. If two men, a man and his brother, are fighting together, and the wife of one of them comes close to rescue her husband from the assailant, and she stretches forth her hand and grabs hold of the assailant's private parts, you should decide an appropriate penalty for her for the embarrassment that she caused with her hand. You should not look upon her with pity. Okay, so there's a payment of embarrassment. Now, in this pasuk, it says, ish va'achiv. Okay. So what's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says that a slave doesn't have embarrassment? As it says, which means only someone that has relatives that has brotherhood. That means his brothers are considered his brothers. But a slave doesn't have brothers because it's not considered family; it's just considered individuals. So the laws of embarrassment won't apply to it. Rabbanan, what do Rabbanan say about this? They say that there is a payment for embarrassment. They say achavu b'mitzvahs. The fact is that a slave still has to do mitzvahs, just like a woman has to do mitzvahs. So that would be it's achiv doesn't mean brotherhood; it means brother in mitzvahs. Okay, now, this was not what we were talking about. We were talking about someone that steals a slave. V'hacha, back to us. What is Rabbi Yehuda going to do? Rabbi Yehuda says that if someone steals a slave, it's chayiv. What about, it says, by us, hechi darish, how does he learn the pasuk? The pasuk says, ki matzi yesh gainav nefesh me'achav. Someone steals a soul from amongst his brothers. What do you mean? It can't be a chatziyav v'chatziv ben chayrin. Rabbi Yehuda say chayiv. My answer is Rabbi Yehuda savar me'achav. When it says me'achav from amongst his brothers, lafuke avadim, it's coming to exclude an actual slave. That's not going to be chayiv. B'nei Yisrael, the pasuk goes on, mi b'nei Yisrael. It says if it would have said b'nei Yisrael, then it would have excluded lemutei mishachetz v'eved v'chetz min chayrin. You have to add in if it would have, because it's going to be tricky here. It would have also excluded someone that's a half slave and half free. But it doesn't say that. It says umi b'nei Yisrael in the extra mem, and from the Jewish people. And from that tells me it's coming to exclude someone that's a half a slave. So basically we just excluded a half a slave twice. So having miyat achar miyat, that's a exclusion after exclusion, and the rule is ein miyat achar miyat el rabbis. If you exclude twice, then you're coming to include. Double negative. It means it's bringing him back in. that's the case, Rabbi Yudol's Mishachetz Rebbe is going to be, if someone steals him, it's going to be chayav. What do the Rabbanan do? The Rabbanan say that he's pater. Rabbanan, they say that Mei Echav, that the pasuk that says from amongst his brothers, Lafuki Avadim. Exactly. Oh, Lafuki Avadim le mashmalu. The achiv b'mitzvos. They hold that he's achiv b'mitzvos. Okay. Similar to what they said by the boishas, by the embarrassment. They said that you have to pay embarrassment. He's a brother in mitzvahs. So what do they do now with Bnei Yisrael? So Bnei Yisrael and Mibnei Yisrael chad l'muti yavet v'chad l'muti mishchatz v'chatz min chayrin. Now I just have two exclusions. One is an eved, a slave. One is to exclude someone that's half a slave. But I don't have a double exclusion on the half a slave, so therefore he's not included back in. So according to the Rabbanan, if someone steals a slave or a half a slave, it's going to be exempt. Okay. Now the Gemara says, "Asharu l'geinev nefesh minayin." What's our source that someone that stole that someone that kidnapped has there's a prohibition on it? We said the punishments, but where did it say thou shall not? So Rabbi Yosha Amar Milay Tignav says in Naser Sadibris, says you shall not steal. And that's referring to kidnapping. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Milay Yimachrum Im Keres Aved, that you shouldn't sell by an Eved Ivri, says you shouldn't sell him like a slave. Because selling him like a slave would be kidnapping. The Gemara says, V'lei pligi. Really, Rabbi Yeshia and Rabbi Yochanan are really not arguing. Why are they each bringing a different source? Because they're each discussing a different part of the prohibition. Mar kachashiv lav de gneva, mar kachashiv lav de mechira. This one is discussing the prohibition against stealing. So he said leisignav, and this one's discussing the prohibition against selling the slave. So he said that you shall not sell him as a slave. So, but they really accept each other's views. It's just that they weren't discussing that side of it.
Well, didn't we say that the person's only chayav if he's sold, or that was only one opinion?
No, I think everyone agrees to that. So, which means that you need to sell him also, in order for the chiyuv, in order for the death penalty. If there would be malchus, I think, just on the one without. Any comment on that?
You need the sale.
Oh, it's not so clear if there's malchus because it's a lav shnit and lazarus mises bestin, because it could incur the death penalty. So then some say that if anything that could incur the death penalty, you don't do the lesser punishment. Yeah, we had that discussion.
You need both, like the change of domain and the sale.
Rabbanan was taught in a brisa. Like Tignaiv says in the 10 Commandments, you shall not steal. The Gemara, the brisa explains, it's talking about someone that kidnaps. You say that it's talking about kidnapping. How do you know it's talking about kidnapping? It's, in the 10 Commandments, people don't, when they list the 10 Commandments, they don't say kidnapping. So how do you know it's talking about kidnapping? You have to look at the 13 attributes, the 13 ways that the Torah is, that we derive laws from the Torah. One of them is davar halamin minyanai, something that's learned from context. What's the psukim talking about over there in the 10 Commandments? Benefashis. All the other prohibitions there are talking about things that incur the death penalty. Afkan benefashis. So here also it's like for example, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery. The other prohibitions there are death penalties. So also the stealing is also going to be a death penalty. But what type of stealing is a death penalty? Only if it's kidnapping. Tanida. Oh, this guy that was telling me about when he was held for ransom. So he had two captors. One of them was terrible, and one of them was nice. So when the police came in, they shot the guy, that bad guy, and he tried to defend the guy, the one that was nice to him. He said, "Don't shoot him." They shot him anyway. They So that was their instructions. They don't. They're not changing the instructions.
In this case, the thief about the kidnapping, it's a Jew. Because if it was a non-Jew, of any Tarasilim would be dead.
Right. Right. It's a good point. Yeah.
It's also very
And
common to feel
I'm sorry?
bad for the kidnapper. It's like there's some kind of syndrome. It's called
Wow.
Stockholm syndrome. It's like where you start empathizing with the kidnapper.
Huh. Wow. Wow. That's interesting. Tani Yidach. It was taught in another brisa. It says, "Leitig noivu." There's another pasuk in Vayikra. In where's that? It says, "Leitig noivu, you shall not steal." And going of mammon akas medaber. That's talking about stealing money. So it's not that even if the Ten Commandments aren't referring to stealing money, but there's another clear verse in the Torah, you can't steal money. Ata, you remember going to mom and you say it's talking about stealing money. Maybe that pasuk is talking about kidnapping. You have to look at the 13 ways the Torah is derived. Something that's learned from context. That's one of the 13. Over there, when the pasuk is talking about when it says leitig noivu over there, it's talking about not to oppress your friend with money. It says talking about b'mammon, safkan, b'mammon. Also here, when it's talking about stealing, in that same context, it's talking about stealing money. Okay. The next Gemara says gets into Edom Zaymamin, which is interesting because there's two parts to the kidnapping. There's the kidnapping and then reselling him. So Edom Zaymamin becomes a little complex. So Yitzmar was stated like this in the Beis HaMedrash. It says, you have two sets of witnesses. Those that witness the kidnapping and those that witness the selling of the person that was kidnapped. And you have four witnesses here. These four witnesses would make one individual get a death penalty. Shehuzmu, turns out that all of them were Zaymamin. Another set of witnesses come in and said, how could you say that you saw that he stole, that he kidnapped? How could you say that he sold them? You weren't even there. You weren't with us in a different city. Chizkiah says that you don't kill those four witnesses. Rabbi Yochanan says you do kill them. Now, why would you kill them? Because they tried to cause a death penalty on that individual that they were testifying about. You're supposed to do to them what they wanted to do. So Rabbi Yochanan, we understand what's the reason for Chizkiah. Where it says, Chizkiah, the Amar Rabbi Akiva. Chizkiah holds like Rabbi Akiva, the Amar, the Rabbi Akiva says, Davar, when it says, by two witnesses, Pishnai Edim Yakum Davar, two witnesses, the matter should be established. Now, V'loi Chatzi Davar, but over here, since these two sets of witnesses, each one is only testifying about half. Each one said, I didn't testify about the whole thing. I only testified that he stole, that he kidnapped. I didn't say that he sold him. The other one says, I only said that he sold him. I didn't say that he kidnapped. So that's because it's a Chatzi Davar, each one is testifying about half. They can't become Edom Zaymamin. They didn't cause the whole thing. They're not fully responsible for the whole thing. They lied about half of it.
But with one, they have nothing.
I understand, but nevertheless. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kirabanan, Rabbi Yochanan argues on Rabbi Kiva. Where's that in Makkos in Baba Basra? Where it says Amar Davar V'Afilu Chatzi Davar. I think we had it over there talking about if you have witnesses that were testifying about 3 years. Remember, we had it's considered a full testimony when each one only testifies about one year. Yeah, that's how it came in over there. At least that's what I remember. Okay. Would they hold that a partial testimony and which combines with other testimonies is considered a full testimony, and therefore they're the ones that are causing the death penalty ultimately. Okay. There's another machlekes. Okay. Let's see. Chizkiah would agree. What happens by the Ben Sera Meir is there's like two stages there. First, they warn him, and then he has to do it again. He has to steal again and drink the wine or whatever. if witnesses come again, then he gets the death penalty. So the Chizkiah would agree that the Edom Achreinim Shel Ben Seir Meir Shehuzmu, that if they were conspiring witnesses, so then Shener Ragan, that they would get killed. The second set, because they're able to say Harishainim Lahalkis Banu. Since the first witnesses already would give Malchus, so therefore the first witnesses have their own testimony. The second witness would be only for death penalty.
But you never get to the second with the first.
Right. But since the first have an independent law that's applied,
so the flogging will come like over to that. And then we'll start from scratch then.
so tell me again.
So with the flogging for the first thing, cover for that, and then it'll be like from scratch again.
Yeah. Yeah, so then they're considered. All right, let's see. Because since the first witness say that we came just to give Malchus, those other witnesses, the second said, fully they're doing an entire testimony, which is Misa. Okay. Rav Papa has a question on this. If Chizkiah really holds this, that the second set of witnesses is the Misa, so why don't we say that the set of witnesses that's testifying that the kidnapped person was sold should also get the because that's the death penalty is going to come because of that. Because they could say that the first set of witnesses is just for Malchus. The Gemara analyzes this. It says 1 second. Maybe Chizkiah holds that the first set of witnesses doesn't get Malchus. But if you're going to say that, but we have a statement that says Eda Geneva Benefesh. Those witnesses that testified about the kidnapping itself, Shehuzmu, that they became Zayman, which means other witnesses came in. We're not talking about witnesses to the selling of him, just to the kidnapping. If you would just have that, so and they became Edim Zayman. Chizkiah Rabbi Yechanan is Machlekes Chizkiah Rabbi Yechanan. Chadam Alaykin, Chadam Ain Alaykin. One of them says you get Malchus. One says you don't get Malchus. We're discussing here Chizkiah because Chizkiah would agree that a Ben Seir and Meir, the second set of witnesses, could be Zayman and get killed. We're asking why doesn't Chizkiah say that by Edei Mechira, by the ones that testified to the selling of it? Should be the same thing. So we said maybe Chizkiah holds that the first set of witnesses doesn't get Malchus by kidnapping. First set of witnesses. So the problem is we have a machlekes if the first set of witnesses get Malchus. It's machlekes Rabbi Yechanan and Chizkiah. We don't know who says what. So this is good. We can say that Chizkiah holds that they don't get Malchus, and that would resolve everything. And it says like this: Bamrinan testayim the Chizkiah damalaikin. Exactly the opposite of what we would want it to say. We have a proof that Chizkiah is the one that says that they do get Malchus, which would mean that if the first set of witnesses get Malchus, the kidnapper, they would get Malchus. Then the second set should get the death penalty, just like by the Ben Seir Meir. How do we know that Chizkiah says the first set gets Malchus? Midamar Chizkiah, because Chizkiah says that after the Edei Mechira come, Ein Neragin. It's really not from Chizkiah. You have to read Rabbi Yechanan first. The Rabbi Yechanan, because if it would be Rabbi Yechanan, because Kivan da Amar Neragin, Rabbi Yechanan says that after we had a machlekes before Chizkiah and Rabbi Yechanan, right? And Rabbi Yechanan holds like the Rabbanan that said that they both get the death penalty, right? Both sets of witnesses get the death penalty. And since Kivan Amar Neragin, Havalei Lavshinit Lazaris Mrs. Bestin, so therefore the first set of witnesses is potentially a death penalty. Anything that's potentially a death penalty also doesn't get Malchus, even if it's not carried out. Kol option lasaris misbezin ain't liken a love. You can't get malchus. So it can't be the one that holds liken cannot be Rabbi Yochanan because Rabbi Yochanan says there's a death penalty on that. The only one that could say liken malchus would be Chizkiah. Chizkiah says malchus. Now we're left with our question: why doesn't he say that the second set of witnesses get the death penalty if there's a? So the Gemara says, "Ihi leilaki."
Is he breaks both like first one and the second one? Logging for the first incident and then he separates.
Yeah, and the question is, if he says that there's flogging for the first set, then there should be a death penalty on the second set. If once you separate it, then that should be an independent. He doesn't say that. He says there is no death penalty on the second set.
But if you separate it, like it's
Then there should be.
Not from scratch, like it doesn't have because it only has one.
Both sets of witnesses arrive. Chizkiah says, in their proven false witnesses, Chizkiah says you don't do the death penalty on any of them. Yeah. The question is, Chizkiah agreed that you do the death penalty on the second set by the Ben Seir Meir. In the same case. And the reason over there was because there was Malchus on the first set. Well, guess what? There's Malchus on the first set here as well. So that's what we're thinking. So anyway, the Gemara says now, the Gemara says, lucky, if we say that the person himself doesn't get Malchus. Lucky, how could we give Malchus to the witnesses? Which means that there has to be Malchus to the person himself if there's just a theft. Now we have a problem. We have a problem with Chizkiah's statement, the explanation we gave for Chizkiah before. He said that there can't be Malchus on the that it's Chatzi Davar, that both sets of witnesses are only testifying to half. It's not half because there's a full Malchus for the first one, and the second one should be the regular death penalty. Elam Rav Papa says, "Be'edi mechira the kol yamali pligi deneragin." If you're talking about the second set of witnesses, everyone would say that if they become zayman, then the ones that testified to the sale, then they should for sure get the death penalty if they're zayman. Ki pligi, when are they arguing and what are they arguing? Be'edi geneva in the first set of witnesses. Chizkiah Amar ein neragin. Chizkiah says that they don't get killed geneva l'chudei kayama because. The Geneva is an independent. The kidnapping itself is independent, and the theft isn't independent. No, they're not part of the second set of. They're not part of the second testimony. Ones that testify to the kidnapping. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Geneva aschalta de mechira. No, when you testify that, you're already beginning the death penalty of that, and that's would be the machlekes over here. Meider Rabbi Yochanan be'edim rishayim shel ben Seir Meir shehuzmu she'ein neragin. Rabbi Yochanan would agree, even though he holds that the Eidei Geneva get killed by the witnesses that testified to the theft. They get killed by kidnapping, but not by ben Seir Meir. Why? Because they could say that wasn't what our intention was. Our intention was just to give Malchus. So why can't they say that over here? I'm not sure. Oh, because there's no Malchus. That's why. Because there's no, according to Rabbi Yochanan, there's no Malchus here. Because it's Nitin Lazarus and Mrs. Bezdin. Because there's only a death penalty. So no Malchus. Abaye says based on this machlekes Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan, comes out that Hakol Maidim ben Seir Meir, Hakol Maidim ben Seir Meir, machlekes ben Seir Meir. Everyone agrees to one case of ben Seir Meir. Everyone agrees to the other case of ben Seir Meir, and there's a machlekes also about a third case. Yeah, you have to explain this. Hakol Maidim ben Seir Meir. Everyone agrees that there's two sets of witnesses, right? There's the first theft of the Ben Saramer, and then there's the second theft of the Ben Saramer. And everyone agreed if they become Zayman. The first set of witnesses don't get killed because they came just to give Malchus. Because they came just to give Malchus, like Rabbi Yochanan agreed to Chizkiah. Hakol might have been Sarah, might have been Machrin. Everyone agrees to the second set of witnesses, Shanei Ragan. If they turn out to be Zayman, that they get killed. Even according to Rabbi Akiva, remember Rabbi Akiva says that it has to be a full testimony, but here it is a full testimony. Machlekes ben Saramer, what's the last case? That's Machlekes. If Shnayim Aimrim b'fneinu ganav, Shnayim Aimrim b'fneinu achal, if you would divide this up, because they had to do two parts to the, he had to steal money from his father, and then he also had to eat it in another domain. The meat he had to buy with that money, meat and wine, he had to eat it. That would be a Machlekes Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan, basically Rabbi Akiva, if that's considered Chatzi Davar. What we do about Chatzi Davar. Okay. Let's try to finish to then. Yeah. Can we continue, or what time do they start? We have another few minutes. I just don't want to. Bez Hashem will learn tonight. I don't want to have to go over this. Amar Abasi, Edi Mechir Benefesh. Two witnesses testify that someone sold a kidnapped person, Shahuzmu, but then they became Edim Zayman. Ein Neragan. You don't kill them. Because they're able to say, Avdi Macharti. You see, we don't have two witnesses to say that he kidnapped him. They only have two witnesses to say that he sold him. So he can say, I didn't kidnap him, he was my slave. Amar Rav Yosef, according to whom does it go? Rabbi Kiva, he says that, according to Rabbi Kiva, that says that you need to have a complete testimony and not a partial testimony. And this testimony is only partial. Amalei Abaya says to Rabbi Yosef, yeah, it has to be according to Rabbi Kiva, Dik Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, Neragin, you're going to kill them. That's the reason for this was not because it's a partial testimony. The reason for this was what Rabasi said, was because he can claim that it wasn't even a kidnapped person. Nothing to do with half a testimony. It's because he can say, no, you're making it look like there's a machlekes here, only according to Rabbi Akiva. Doesn't have to do with the machlekes. Elafil Timur Rabbanan. Abaya is saying. Abaya says that this Rabasi could even go according to the Rabbanan, because he says mitaych. Why don't you kill them? But layasu edi geneva. We're talking about when witnesses that he stole the person never arrived. If that's the case, my lamemer. So what's the chiddush? What's Rabasi telling me? He sold his own slave. I don't need to. That's no chiddush there. That it's no death penalty. Leitricha. Chiddush is the alpha gav asal b'seif. The truth is that after the witnesses testified that he sold him, another set of witnesses came and said that he stole him. Nevertheless, the witnesses that said that he stole him, that he sold him, are going to be pater, even though they turned out to be Zayman. Because when they testified, they weren't testifying about a death penalty. It was only later that it turned into a death. So what's the chiddush? Because when they came, they weren't. Maybe that wasn't their intention. Like the Kamaram Zirim we see them signaling to each other. They're winking at each other. The first set of witnesses winked to the second set. Could have thought that maybe the winking means that they're conspiring and they're going to come later, and it's all one set of witnesses. Kamash Malan, coming to teach us that the fact that they were winking to each other doesn't mean that it's really conspiring all in as one thing. We don't know that. And therefore, the testimony of the witnesses that said that he was sold don't get the death penalty. Interesting, huh? Okay. Let's leave it over here. Yeah, Bezos Hashem. Let's try